She vanished after church. 14 years later, her daughter opens the wrong envelope. They all remembered the last sermon. Pastor Celeste Sullivan stood bathed in Sunday morning light, robes fluttering like wings, voice ringing through the tiny church like a psalm made flesh. By nightfall, she was gone. No note, no trace, no farewell. Just the half-drunk tea in her office and the scent of her lavender oil still clinging to the pulpit. The police called it a mental break. The church called it God's will. Her children, they were told to move on. But 14 years later, in the quiet hum of a church basement during a fundraiser, her daughter Amira opened the wrong envelope and saw a photo that should not exist. Her mother, alive, and standing beside the one man no one dared question, Bishop Malachi Ward. The southern sun still burned outside. But in Amira's chest, a colder storm began to rise. The envelope was unremarkable. Cream-colored, sealed with a thin strip of Scotch tape, and stacked among a dozen others in a donation basket near the back of the fellowship hall. If Amira hadn't offered to help sort through the fundraiser paperwork after service, it would have gone to Naomi or Tobias or one of the deacons, someone less curious, someone still loyal. But Amira Sullivan had long since stopped believing in coincidences. The hall was quiet now. Afternoon light spilled through the stained glass windows of New Dawn Missionary Baptist Church, casting soft reds and purples on the linoleum floor. Folding chairs were stacked neatly against the walls, the smell of fried catfish and cornbread still faint in the air. Outside, the congregation had scattered to Sunday naps and front porch gossip. Inside, Amira sat alone at a plastic table, sorting envelopes into piles. Tithes, community fund, building repair. The mislabeled one was stuffed into the corner, marked Youth Ministry. It was heavier than the others. She slid it open with a key from her lanyard. At first, all she saw was a folded note and a 4x6 photograph. She pulled the photo out first, expecting a bake sale flyer or a Bible verse coloring sheet. Instead, time cracked. Her fingers trembled, her breath caught. She blinked, and the world didn't go back to normal. The image was grainy, like it had been printed from a surveillance camera. But the face was clear. Her mother's face. A little older, thinner, streaks of gray in her tight bun, but unmistakably Pastor Celeste Sullivan. And she was standing beside Bishop Malachi Ward. Amira's mouth went dry. The last time anyone had seen her mother was the morning she delivered that sermon about walking through the valley of shadows with your back straight and your eyes open. People said it was the most powerful service she'd ever led. They'd played a recording of it every year since. The town turned it into legend. The story of how God had called Pastor Celeste home early, like Elijah. Only Amira had never believed it. Not really. She remembered the details others ignored, how the police barely searched, how the church leaders discouraged them from airing dirty laundry, how Bishop Ward told them grief must bow to grace. She remembered the scent of bleach in her mother's office, and now here was proof, a photograph. Not 14 years old. No, the timestamp in the corner read, March 8th, 2023. Just 5 months ago. Amira flipped over the photo. A handwritten note was scrawled on the back, shaky but still legible. You asked the wrong questions, but you were right to keep asking. She's not dead. She never was. R. Rome? Deacon Rome? He'd been acting strange all month, more tired than usual, always glancing over his shoulder, fumbling through his sermons when Ward let him guest preach. He'd been the one in charge of handling envelopes today. He must have slipped this in by mistake, or on purpose. Amira's phone buzzed on the table, yanking her back to the moment. A text from her brother Tobias. Don't forget dinner at Dad's. Naomi made oxtail. She stared at it, still holding the photo like it was burning her fingers. There were only two choices now. Pretend she never saw it, or act. Amira reached for her phone and took a picture of the photo and the note, then slipped both back into the envelope and sealed it shut. Her journalist instincts kicked in. Document, duplicate, hide. She shoved the envelope into her tote bag beneath her notebook and charger, then stood slowly, heart pounding. The air felt heavier now. Like the walls themselves were listening. She didn't trust the church anymore. Not the elders, not the deacons, and certainly not Bishop Ward. With his silver cufflinks and thunderous voice and locked office door, no one else was allowed to enter. He had been her mother's mentor, her spiritual covering. And if this photo was real, he had lied to everyone. especially them. Amira grabbed her bag and made her way toward the side exit, bypassing the sanctuary. The hallway lights flickered as she walked, old wiring or maybe something more deliberate. Her footsteps echoed louder than they should have on the tile floor. She was almost to the exit when a voice stopped her cold. "You find what you were looking for?" Amira froze. Deacon Rome stood in the shadows by the water fountain, half hidden by a support beam. He looked different, older than his 56 years, cheeks sunken, eyes tired like they hadn't slept right in weeks. "I was just cleaning up," she replied, voice even. He tilted his head. "I meant in the envelope." A silence stretched. Amira didn't answer. She didn't deny it either. Rome stepped out from the shadows, his shoes scuffing the tile. "I couldn't keep it quiet no more," he said. "Your mama, she didn't leave like they said. She didn't run. She was taken." "By who?" Rome hesitated, then whispered, "By the church." Amira's stomach turned. "They said it was to protect us all. That she'd gotten too bold. Started asking the kind of questions that unravel a whole faith." He laughed bitterly. "She thought she could fight the devil from inside his own house." Amira took a step back. "Why are you telling me this now?" Rome looked at her like a man already marked for death. "Because I'm tired of being a coward." A door slammed at the far end of the hall. Rome's eyes darted toward the noise. His voice dropped to a desperate whisper. "Don't come back here, Amira. Not alone. Not again." Then he disappeared through the janitor's door, leaving Amira standing there, clutching her bag, heart thudding so loud she thought it might echo through the stained glass. Outside, the Georgia heat wrapped around her like a fever. But inside her chest, a storm had already begun. She didn't know what she'd just stepped into, but she knew one thing for sure. Her mother was still alive, and this church had buried more than just the truth. The Sullivan house hadn't changed much in 14 years. The porch still creaked in the same spot, just before the second step. The screen door still groaned like it had a soul trapped inside. And Franklin Sullivan still insisted on sitting by the window every evening, watching the street like it owed him something. Amira stood at the edge of the driveway for a moment, letting the humidity sink into her skin. The cicadas were out, buzzing in long, hypnotic waves, like they too were trying to drown out a truth too sharp to touch. She hadn't told anyone about the envelope. Not Tobias, not Naomi, not Rayla, and definitely not Quincy. They all believed in the version of the story they'd been fed. Mama got overwhelmed, cracked under pressure, walked away. Amira had never bought that. A woman doesn't preach about standing in the fire one morning and vanish into smoke by sundown. She pushed the screen door open and stepped into the familiar blend of furniture polish, fried onions, and Old Spice. Her father was in his recliner, same spot, same position, remote in one hand, glass of sweet tea in the other. A half-eaten plate of Naomi's oxtail sat on the tray in front of him. "You're late," he said without looking up. "I stayed after service to help." He finally turned toward her, and for a moment, Amira saw the ghost of the man he used to be. Before the stroke, before the cane, before Celeste's disappearance carved a canyon into him that no sermon could fill. "You help too much," he muttered. "That church don't deserve your energy." Amira gave a tight smile. "You've been saying that since Mama left." He didn't answer, just stared at the TV as if the news anchor might finally say something worth hearing. Naomi entered from the kitchen, apron still on, curls pulled back, a wooden spoon in her hand like a scepter. "You missed dinner. Don't think we're saving you pie. Didn't come for pie." "Then what?" Amira glanced at Tobias, who had just walked in from the backyard, shirt damp with sweat. "Y'all remember Deacon Rome?" "Of course," Naomi said cautiously. "He was acting strange today, like scared." "That man always been jittery," Tobias muttered, wiping his brow. "He's been sliding downhill ever since Mama, ever since she left." Amira set her bag on the table and pulled out her phone. She hesitated. Showing the photo would mean dragging them back into pain they'd each found ways to bury. Tobias had a wife and a mortgage now. Naomi had her hands full managing their father's meds. Rayla was holding herself together by doing everything exactly like Mama used to. And Quincy? He barely remembered her at all. But something in her gut wouldn't let her keep it to herself. She tapped the screen and pulled up the photo. "I found this in a donation envelope. Today." She placed the phone on the table, screen up. They all leaned in. Tobias squinted. Naomi sucked in a breath. Franklin leaned forward, hands trembling. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Naomi whispered, "Is that?" "Yes," Amira said, "and that's Bishop Ward standing next to her." Tobias shook his head slowly. "That's got to be photoshopped. Or old." "Look at the timestamp," Amira replied. "March of this year." Franklin's voice cut through the tension like gravel dragged across concrete. "Where?" Rome didn't say, just that Mama was taken. "Not by strangers, by people inside the church." Naomi staggered back like she'd been slapped. "That's not possible." Tobias stood rigid, jaw clenched. "You expect me to believe that Bishop Ward, of all people, kidnapped our mother and kept her hidden for 14 years? I'm not asking you to believe anything," Amira said. "I'm telling you what I saw, and that someone slipped this into the wrong envelope. Or maybe the right one. Maybe they want the truth to come out. Or maybe you're seeing what you want to see." "Say that again," Amira snapped, her voice rising. "Say it to my face." The room crackled with tension. Their father raised his hand, just slightly, just enough. "I believe her." Everyone turned. Franklin's voice was calm but heavy. "I don't know what happened to your mother. I never did, but I never believed she left because she wanted to. That wasn't Celeste. And if there's even a chance she's alive—" He trailed off, eyes glinting with something Amira hadn't seen in him in years. "Hope." Tobias sat down, rubbing his temples. "What do you plan to do?" "I'm going to find out where that photo was taken. I'm going to trace it back." Naomi folded her arms. "And then what? March into Bishop Ward's office with a printout?" "No, I'm going to find someone who'll actually do something about it." "Like who?" Amira hesitated. She hadn't said his name in years. "Detective Lyle Mercer." Franklin flinched. "Mercer? That man been persona non grata around here since he started sniffing around the church funds 10 years ago. Bishop Ward buried him." "I know," Amira said, "which means he's exactly who I need." Rayla entered from upstairs, hair wrapped, eyes wide. "What's going on?" Everyone fell silent. Amira looked at her baby sister, the one who had only been 5 when Mama disappeared, the one who still set the table with an extra plate every Sunday. She smiled sadly. "We might have just found Mama." The last time Amira saw Detective Lyle Mercer, he'd been sitting in his car outside the church, engine off, eyes trained on the stained glass windows like he was waiting for a confession that never came. She'd been 17, still clinging to the hope that someone, anyone, would keep asking questions. But Mercer's questions had made people uncomfortable. And in a place like Shiloh County, uncomfortable men got reassigned, or worse, forgotten. Amira drove out to the edge of town, where the gas stations turned into soybean fields and the streetlights gave up. His house sat behind a row of leaning mailboxes, half hidden by pine trees. The gravel crunched beneath her tires as she pulled into the driveway. An old Ford Crown Vic sat rusting under a tarp beside the porch. The front light was off, but she knew he was home. She'd seen the curtain twitch. Amira stepped out of the car with the envelope in her bag and the photo already printed in her pocket. Her boots echoed on the wooden porch as she knocked once, twice, then a third time, harder. No answer. She reached for the doorknob just as the door opened a crack. "Wrong house," came the voice from inside. "It's Amira Sullivan." A pause. The door opened wider, enough for her to see him. Older now, beard flecked with gray, shoulder hunched slightly from an injury she remembered him getting on the job. He studied her face for a beat longer than necessary. "Celeste's daughter." "Yes. She's been gone a long time." "Yes," Amira said. "But I don't think she's gone anymore." That got his attention. He stepped aside. "Come in." The house smelled like old books, black coffee, and a faint trace of cigarette smoke. A cluttered desk sat in the corner, covered in case files, maps, and a corkboard still pinned with notes from investigations long since shelved. The blinds were closed. The air felt like it hadn't moved in years. He motioned toward the couch. "Talk." Amira sat and handed him the photo. Mercer took one look, then exhaled slowly through his nose. "Jesus. You recognize her?" "You know I do, and him." "Bishop Ward." He nodded grimly. "That man's been untouchable since before you were born. I tried to follow the money back when your mother disappeared. Church renovations, retreat centers, private security budgets that didn't add up. But no one would talk. Witnesses vanished, records got lost in storms. You ever see a southern summer so convenient?" He leaned back, still staring at the photo. "Where did you get this?" In a donation envelope. I think someone wanted me to find it. Who? Deacon Rome. Mercer's eyes narrowed. He's still alive? Amira nodded, and scared. Mercer stood, pacing now. This photo, if it's real, changes everything. It means Celeste didn't leave, she was disappeared. Can you help me find her? He looked at her, long and hard. I lost my badge a long time ago, Amira. But not your instincts. That got a flicker of a smile. No, not those. Amira stood beside him now, holding his gaze close. You were the only one who ever asked the right questions. I remember how they treated you for it. How they shut you out. Mercer walked over to the desk, pulled out a file folder so old the corners had curled. This is everything I ever gathered on the Sullivan disappearance, he said. Never could let it go. Something about it never sat right. He opened it. Notes, photocopies, maps of church-owned land. One red pin in particular stood out. A compound deep in the Pinewoods, labeled Sanctuary Retreat Ward Family Trust. Amira pointed at it. What's that? Supposed to be a spiritual retreat, used for fasting, reflection, clergy-only access. I tried to get a warrant back in the day, but with no probable cause and the church board screaming religious persecution, the judge laughed me out of his robe. Do you think she's there? Mercer didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out a drawer and removed a flash drive. I've got copies of utility records, security payments, deliveries. There's traffic out there, more than you'd expect for a place supposedly abandoned 6 days a week. He looked up. We're not dealing with just a church, Amira. We're dealing with something that learned to wear the church like armor. Amira felt a cold knot in her stomach. I'm not asking you to kick down the door, she said. I'm asking you to help me find proof, something undeniable. Mercer nodded slowly. Then we start with surveillance. We get eyes on that property, track who comes and goes. If we find Ward or Rome or your mother, we take it straight to the Attorney General, and we leak it at the same time. He glanced at the photo again. You realize what this means, right? If she's alive, she didn't just disappear. She was held, controlled, probably coerced into silence. Amira felt something burn behind her eyes, but forced it down. She never stopped fighting, she whispered. I won't either. Mercer handed her the folder. Go home. Pretend nothing's changed. Let them think you're still the grieving daughter with questions and no answers. And you? He gave her a tired smile. I'll pretend I never stopped investigating. Outside, the cicadas were screaming again. The air was heavy with everything they couldn't say. But for the first time in 14 years, Amira Sullivan walked to her car with something she hadn't felt since the day her mother vanished. A reason to believe. They began watching on a Wednesday. Detective Mercer had an old friend who owed him favors. The kind of man who worked in silence and moved like fog through legal gray zones. By Thursday morning, 3 small trail cameras were mounted along the outer perimeter of the sanctuary retreat, hidden inside hollowed-out pine logs and camouflaged against the bark. No one saw them, but the cameras saw everything. Amira sat in Mercer's living room that night, her laptop open, the live feed blinking across 3 windows. The sanctuary compound was surrounded by miles of woods, tall fences, and a single gated entrance manned by a rotating pair of security volunteers. But they didn't look like any church ushers Amira had ever seen. Tactical boots, radios, dark clothing. One even wore a sidearm. These men are trained, Mercer muttered, watching the footage from over her shoulder. That's not church security. That's ex-military. And that? Amira pointed to a black SUV that had entered the compound just minutes earlier. It was the second one that day. Mercer jotted down the time. Same vehicle that came through last night. Tinted windows, no plates. Whatever's happening in there is active, organized. Amira clicked on the 3rd feed. It showed the southern fence, where a narrow gravel path curved into the woods. Suddenly, movement. A woman, slipping through the tree line. She was thin, wearing what looked like a medical uniform. Scrubs, maybe, but it was hard to tell in the dim light. She paused near the fence, glanced over her shoulder, then knelt by a stump. What is she doing? Amira whispered. The woman pulled something from under her sleeve, a folded piece of paper. She tucked it beneath the stump, then stood quickly and hurried back toward the compound. Mercer leaned forward. She's leaving messages. Amira's heart pounded. It could be my mother. Mercer shook his head. Too young. Wrong build. But she knows something. She's trying to get word out. They rewound the footage, zoomed in on the woman's face. The image was blurry, but Amira recognized the eyes, haunted and urgent, the look of someone who'd spent too long on the edge of survival. Mercer tapped the screen. "Tomorrow morning, we go out there, quietly. You'll stay in the car. I'll recover whatever she left." Amira didn't argue, not yet, but as she stared at the screen, she thought of the photograph, the note from Rome, the surveillance cameras, the guards. This wasn't just about her mother anymore. This was bigger, wider, a machine that devoured people and called itself holy. And someone inside wanted it to stop. By sunrise, they were parked half a mile from the southern fence. Mercer moved like a ghost through the trees. Amira watched from the car, gripping her phone, the silence pressing down on her like a second skin. After 20 minutes, Mercer reappeared, crouching low, holding a sealed Ziploc bag. Inside was the note. He climbed into the passenger seat, breathing hard. "She double-wrapped it in plastic," he said. "Smart girl." Amira unfolded the note slowly. The handwriting was small and tight, like someone writing fast under pressure. "There are at least 10 of us inside. They rotate us, change names. Some don't remember who they were. She's here, taught me how to leave this message. Name is Celeste. She watches over us. Please hurry. I think they're moving her soon." Amira's hands trembled. "She's alive. She's helping people. She's still her." Mercer exhaled slowly. "We need to move faster. If they're relocating her, we might lose the window." Amira blinked hard, forcing her mind to steady. "Then we don't wait." "What do you mean?" She pulled out her phone and opened a folder. Clips she'd been secretly recording of the security feeds, screenshots of the guards, license plate photos, the note. A quiet fire lit behind her eyes. "We go public." Mercer looked at her like she'd dropped a match into a powder keg. "You're not thinking straight." "No," she said. "I'm thinking exactly how they don't expect me to. I'm the daughter of a disappeared woman, a black pastor. I'm a journalist. If I tell this story, if I show people the footage, the note, the guards, someone will start asking questions. They'll try to shut it down before it spreads. Then we leak it in pieces. Strategic. I'll give the church just enough rope to hang themselves." Mercer paused, calculating. "And what happens if they come after you?" Amira looked out the windshield toward the trees that hid her mother. "Then they'll learn what happens when you try to bury a woman who refused to stay silent." Later that night, Amira sat on her bedroom floor, back against the wall, laptop glowing in her lap. The headline blinked in her draft folder, "The Sanctuary Lie," inside the disappearance of Pastor Celeste Sullivan. She attached the photo, the note, a carefully trimmed 12-second video clip of the woman leaving the message by the stump. Just enough to ignite curiosity, just enough to threaten a storm. Her fingers hovered over the send button, to Mercer, to an editor friend up north, to a regional watchdog blog, and to a private, encrypted cloud, just in case. With one breath, she clicked, send. The silence that followed was enormous, and underneath it, the first rumble of something shifting, something old, something sacred, something about to fall. The story went live at 7:13 a.m. By 8:02, the church's website was down. By 8:30, Bishop Malachi Ward had called an emergency press briefing, and by 9, Amira's inbox was flooded with anonymous messages, threats disguised as prayers, and one chilling voice memo. "You're playing with sacred fire, girl. Careful you don't get burned." She deleted it, heart pounding. But she didn't stop. By noon, the clip of the woman at the fence had gone viral on Southern Twitter. A few skeptical local outlets picked it up, running headlines that danced around the core accusation, phrases like "concerns raised about church-run facility" and "unverified claims of religious misconduct." And then came the twist. Not from the church, but from her mother. Or rather, from someone claiming to be her. Amira was in Mercer's living room again, pacing as he reviewed the latest surveillance downloads. The security presence at the sanctuary retreat had doubled since the article. More armed men. Fewer comings and goings. "They're locking it down," he muttered. "They're either preparing to run or preparing for war." Amira barely heard him. She held her phone like it was a relic. The email had come an hour ago, routed through a scrambled account. No name, no subject line, only this. "You have to stop. You're going to get people hurt. I chose this. Tell Rayla to stop setting a place for me. See." Amira read it 3 times before she let herself sit down. Mercer looked up. "What is it?" She handed him the phone. He read it, brow furrowed. Could be fake, could be someone trying to rattle you. Or it could be her. Would your mother say something like this? Amira's voice cracked. My mother would never tell me to stop, but if she thought someone else was in danger, maybe she would. Mercer paced, thinking aloud. We know she was helping people inside, teaching them how to leave messages. Organizing. That's not someone who's given up. Then why the message? Because someone found out. Amira went cold. You think they made her write it? Mercer didn't answer. He didn't have to. Amira stood, suddenly restless. We have to do something. If they're forcing her to recant, Mercer held up a hand. We move too fast. We could trigger a purge. They'd erase everything and everyone before law enforcement gets involved. We need leverage. She stared at him. We already exposed them. We gave the public a glimpse. That's not enough for a warrant, not for a site shielded by religious exemption and decades of political insulation. We need something concrete, a name, a confession, a whistleblower. Amira's mind spun. And then, like a thread pulled from the corner of memory, she remembered the lease agreement, the fake name, the second man in the photograph. The man in the picture, she said suddenly. Mercer blinked. Which one? With my mother. The surveillance image. Not Ward. The other one. The man beside her, cropped out on most copies but visible in the raw version. Mercer opened his folder, flipped through printouts, found the image. The man stood half-turned away, hand on Celeste's shoulder. Tall, stocky build, balding. Familiar somehow. That's Ezekiel Ward, Mercer muttered. Bishop Malachi's son. Amira froze. He was excommunicated, disappeared from the public eye about 6 years ago. Rumors said he'd gotten involved with some underground operation. Money laundering, identity scrubbing, but nothing stuck. Amira grabbed her laptop, opened the image, zoomed in. It's not just a photo, it's a connection. If Ezekiel's still working with the church, running operations on the outside, we can find him. Assuming he hasn't buried himself under a dozen aliases. She stared at the photo, searching for clues. Behind Celeste, a piece of machinery was visible. Metal grating, industrial piping, and a stenciled number. D7-324. She tapped it into a search engine. Nothing useful. She tried again, cross-referencing it with Georgia Port Authority tags. Still nothing. Mercer leaned over her shoulder. Try state prison transport databases. That number looks like a shipping code or a decommissioned tag. Amira's fingers flew. After 3 tries, she found something buried in an archived transport log. Vehicle D7324. Registered to Ward Restoration Group, decommissioned 3 years ago, last recorded location, Athens GA warehouse site. She turned to Mercer, fire in her chest. We just found their logistics hub. That night, while the rest of Shiloh County sat glued to the evening news, Amira and Mercer drove to Athens under the cover of dark. The address was on the outskirts of town, near the river, surrounded by rusted fences and a graveyard of abandoned semi-trailers. The warehouse sat silent, no lights, no signs, but cameras mounted along the corners told them it was very much alive. They didn't try to enter. Instead, Mercer planted a 4th trail cam across the street, masked as a utility box. It would run infrared at night and motion capture during the day. We watch, Mercer said, adjusting the angle. And if Ezekiel Ward shows his face, we nail him, Amira finished. Back in the car, she stared at the blank building, her fists clenched in her lap. They think fear will make me stop. Mercer glanced at her. Will it? No. She took out her phone, tapped out a new message. This one to the woman who'd left the original note at the stump. She'd routed a response through the same encrypted channel the woman had used to send the update 2 nights ago. We're not stopping. You're not alone. We're coming. A. Then she sent it, and for the first time she imagined her mother reading those words in some dark room, under a flickering light. A message echoing back across 14 years of silence. You were never forgotten. The message back came at 3:14 a.m. Amira had fallen asleep on the couch, laptop still balanced on her knees, her phone buzzing softly against her chest. She jolted awake, wiped at her eyes, and squinted at the screen. They're moving us Friday. Transport at dawn. She's not going quietly. I don't think she'll make it unless you stop them first. No name, no signature, just dread soaked in every word. Friday. That was 2 days away. Amira sat up straight, heart hammering. She dialed Mercer, who answered on the second ring. Warehouse, she said. Friday. Dawn. They're moving her. He grunted, half awake. Then we don't have time. We need to smoke Ezekiel out, fast. I'll do it. Do what? Go public. Again, this time I name him. Mercer exhaled. If you're wrong, I'm not. And she wasn't. Not just because of the photo or the registration number or the matching vehicles caught on the trail cams, but because she felt it, deep in her bones, in that place her mother once called the knowing. It was the same way Celeste used to know who in the congregation was hurting before they said a word. And now it was Amira's turn to see through the silence. She published the piece at 10:03 a.m. sharp. Meet Ezekiel Ward, the bishop's hidden son and the church's darkest secret. It contained the untouched version of the photograph showing Ezekiel's face clearly. A history of Ward Restoration Group and its shell companies. Footage of the same black SUV leaving the sanctuary retreat, then entering the Athens warehouse compound 2 hours later. The decommissioned state registry of vehicle D7324. And the leaked property lease agreement signed under a fake name, Elijah Morrow, a known alias linked to Ezekiel. It was, as Mercer put it, the kind of thing that makes powerful men sweat through their silk collars. Within the hour, it was trending on regional news sites and picked up by 3 national outlets. Twitter exploded. Comments raged. A Southern Baptist coalition demanded an internal review. And then around noon, something even stranger happened. Naomi called. Come home, she said quietly. Amira hesitated. Why? Naomi's voice cracked. Rayla found something. When Amira arrived at the house, Rayla was sitting at the kitchen table staring at a sealed envelope. Her hands were shaking. It was in the bottom drawer of Mama's sewing cabinet, Rayla whispered, the one nobody touched since she left. Amira sat down. Naomi stood at the counter, arms crossed, clearly torn between fear and something harder, guilt. We used to think you were obsessed, Naomi said, that you couldn't let go. But now I think maybe we let go too soon. Amira said nothing. She just picked up the envelope. There was a name on it, not hers. To Quincy, on his 18th birthday. She looked at Naomi, stunned. She wrote him a letter? Naomi nodded. Maybe more. They opened it together. The letter inside was handwritten, long and rambling in places, but the core message was crystal clear. If you're reading this, I didn't come back. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't. I'm not lost. I'm trapped. By people I once trusted with my life. They used my faith against me. They told me it was God's will that I stay silent. But silence is not holy. It is how evil survives. One day someone will come looking, someone brave enough. Trust them, help them, believe them. And remember, baby, your mother never stopped loving you. Rayla sobbed quietly. Naomi turned away, shoulders shaking. Amira felt something ancient rise in her chest. Not rage, not grief, but a clarity so sharp it nearly hurt. This wasn't just a search anymore. It was a reckoning. She brought the letter to Mercer, who scanned it with trembling fingers. It's a confession, he said. Not in legal terms, but emotionally. This is a woman who knew she was being silenced, and that means the church knew too. And now we have proof. Yes, and they'll do anything to bury it. Mercer made a call. Several, actually. To a contact in the GBI. To an old friend at the U.S. Marshals Service. To a sympathetic civil rights lawyer who'd once sued a mega-church and lived to talk about it. But just as he hung up, his burner phone rang. He answered, listened for 10 seconds, then went white. What is it? Amira asked. They know we're watching the warehouse. Her breath caught. What? The camera's gone. Ripped out. No trace. They're cleaning house. Amira's blood ran cold. Then we're out of time. No, Mercer said. Then we go now. As they prepared to leave, Amira's phone vibrated again. This time it was Quincy. Check Rayla's window. Someone left this taped to the glass. Attached was a photo, a Polaroid, of Celeste, face bruised, eyes fierce, holding a cardboard sign. Friday is a lie. They're moving us tonight. Help. The timestamp read 6:37 p.m. It was already 7:04. Mercer and Amira looked at each other and bolted. The tires screamed as they peeled off the Sullivan driveway. Mercer didn't bother with headlights for the first stretch. He drove like a man who'd buried too many regrets and didn't intend to add another. Amira sat beside him in stunned silence, her hands shaking, the photo of her mother still glowing on her phone screen, bruised, but alive. Fierce, but desperate. And if the message was right, they had less than an hour before she was gone again. Maybe for good. They tore past cornfields and boarded-up gas stations, past churches with glowing signs that said "Let go and let God," past shuttered storefronts and the ghosts of small-town Georgia's Sunday best. Amira never prayed much, not since her mother vanished and the world kept spinning like that was normal. But now she closed her eyes and whispered, "Don't let me be too late." The compound looked different at night. Not quiet, alert. The gate was open. The security volunteers were gone. In their place, real mercenaries, tactical gear, earpieces, night vision scopes, trucks idling near the dormitories, their beds lined with black duffel bags and makeshift benches. Mercer parked in the shadows, a quarter-mile back in the woods. He handed Amira a pair of binoculars. "They're loading vans, 3 of them. This is it." "I need to get inside," she whispered. "Absolutely not." "Lyle, she's there. This is the last window we'll get. If they take her out tonight, we'll never find her again. You said it yourself." He didn't answer, but he didn't stop her. Instead, he popped the trunk. Inside, a camera harness, a hidden mic, and a folded black hoodie. "This was never supposed to happen," he muttered. Amira pulled the hoodie on. "Everything in my life has been leading here," she said softly. "You just didn't know it yet." The plan was simple. Mercer would circle around the back and intercept any outgoing vehicle with police backup on standby. Amira would slip in through the woods, using the employee trail, the same one the woman had used to leave her message, to reach the side dormitory where the non-staffed occupants were housed. There were no second chances. She moved fast and low, heart pounding in her ears. She could hear shouting now, orders barked in clipped code, boots slamming into metal, the grind of wheels on gravel, and then a voice, soft, familiar, from the side of one of the trucks. "Keep her in the back, she's trying to talk to the others." Amira froze. It was Ezekiel Ward, closer than she thought, too close. She crawled behind a stack of crates, barely breathing, eyes scanning the shadows. A figure was being led to the rear of the last van, hands zip-tied, hair tied back in a familiar bun, now streaked with silver and sweat. "Celeste," Amira's breath caught. Her mother turned slightly, just enough for their eyes to meet across 30 yards of darkness. And Celeste froze. Amira stood slowly, lifting her hands just enough to show her face. Celeste's expression cracked, shock, terror, and then something harder to define. Not joy, not relief, but resolve. She shouted, "No." Ezekiel turned. "What?" She lunged, head first, into the guard nearest her. He stumbled. The others moved to restrain her. Chaos exploded. Amira ran, straight into the clearing, straight into the floodlights, straight toward her mother. "Celeste, get down!" Mercer's voice roared from the tree line. Gunfire erupted, not at Amira but into the air. Distraction. Mercer charged from the opposite side, drawing fire and panic with a dummy pistol he'd brought for precisely this chaos. Sirens screamed in the distance. Backup. Law enforcement. Someone had tipped them off, or maybe Mercer had planned for this possibility all along. Amira reached her mother just as she fell to her knees. Mom, it's me." Celeste looked up, dazed, blood trailing from a gash on her temple. She smiled. Even bleeding, even shaking, she smiled. "Took you long enough?" The rest blurred. Law enforcement flooded the compound. Ezekiel disappeared, vanished into the woods, or one of the escape vehicles Mercer hadn't seen. 2 of the guards were arrested on the spot. A handful of women, 12 in total, were recovered from the retreat center's interior rooms, malnourished but alive. Celeste was taken into custody, not as a suspect, but as a protective witness. She rode with Amira in the back of an ambulance, holding her daughter's hand like she'd never let go again. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Celeste broke the silence. "I told them someone would come." Amira squeezed her hand tighter. "We never stopped looking." Celeste shook her head slowly. "No," she said, "you never stopped believing." At the hospital, as they stitched her up and gave her a hot meal and quiet space, Mercer called Amira into the hallway. "They're already spinning it," he warned. Church Board issued a statement calling this a rogue operation run without oversight. They're disavowing Ezekiel, claiming they had no idea. And Ward? Gone. Vacated his home this morning. We'll find him, but it'll take time. Amira nodded. Then we wait. Mercer studied her for a long moment. "You saved her life tonight," he said. "You saved more than that." Amira looked back through the glass at her mother. "No," she whispered. "She saved herself. I just lit the match." The hospital room was dim and quiet, the only light coming from the low-glow monitor above the IV line and the soft spill of street lamp glow through slatted blinds. Amira sat beside her mother's bed, notebook in hand, recorder on the nightstand, not as a journalist, as a daughter. "Are you sure?" she asked gently. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to say." Celeste Sullivan opened her eyes. They were clear, unflinching. "I've waited 14 years, she said. "I'm ready." Her voice didn't tremble. Not when she said Ezekiel Ward's name, not when she said the phrase deliverance protocol. Not even when she described the night she disappeared. "It wasn't planned," Celeste began. "Not at first. I was just trying to clean up the books. I found gaps, donations that never made it into our community funds, endowments rerouted to off-site healing centers I'd never heard of." Her hand tightened on the blanket. "I confronted Malachi. He smiled, said I'd misunderstood, invited me to tour one of the retreat sites personally. I went, alone." Amira said nothing. Let the silence hold space for the rest. Celeste looked away. "They drugged my tea. I woke up somewhere else. Not a prison, not at first. More like a re-education center. Bible verses on the walls, devotionals every morning, no last names, no phones. They took my wedding ring." Her voice thinned. "They told me it was the Lord's will, that I was being purified, that I had been prideful, too visible, too bold in the pulpit, that my mouth had become a liability to the Lord's work." Tears welled in her eyes but didn't fall. "I told them I wanted to leave, that my family needed me. They said if I left, they'd ruin me, frame me. Said they'd send videos to my children showing me unfit. That the church would publicly mourn me, then privately erase me." She let out a shaky breath, and they did. Amira scribbled notes without even realizing, her hand moving on instinct. But inside, her heart felt like glass pushed too hard in one spot. What happened after that? "They moved me, from place to place, always surrounded by women like me. Some were true believers, others, like me, had resisted. I became useful. I helped the new ones adjust. They stopped watching me as closely." She met Amira's eyes. "I never stopped remembering who I was, and I never forgot who you were. That's why I taught Liana how to leave that message." "The girl who slipped the note?" "She reminded me of you. Fire in her, no matter how much they tried to drown it." Amira reached for her mother's hand, their fingers locked like no time had passed. "But the Polaroid," Amira whispered. "You looked hurt." Celeste nodded slowly. "They found Liana's last message, tracked her movements. Someone must have told them she was getting help. They made me send the email. They made me write that she was wrong. I agreed to cooperate until I saw you outside." Her eyes shimmered now. "I saw you, just standing there, like you were made of spine and thunder." Amira laughed through her tears. "You always said I was your storm child." Celeste smiled. "And you rained on them, baby." The door opened, and Mercer stepped inside. He looked tired but satisfied, like a soldier returning from war. "They're debriefing the rescued women now," he said. "Some are pressing charges, others are just trying to remember their names." Celeste nodded, her voice steady. "I'll testify. Every name, every lie, every dollar." Mercer looked between the two women, then added, "They found Ezekiel." Amira stood. "Where?" "Private airstrip, trying to board a flight to the Dominican. The name on the fake passport? Elijah Morrow." Celeste let out a breath that sounded like release. "I want to see him," she said softly. Amira turned to her, alarmed. "Mom, I won't hurt him," she said. "I just want him to see my face, the one they never broke." Mercer hesitated, then nodded. "I'll see what I can arrange, but for now, rest." Celeste lay back against the pillow. "But promise me one thing," she said to Amira. "Anything. When this is over, don't let the fire turn to ash. Use it." Amira didn't need to ask what she meant. This wasn't just survival, it was legacy. Later that night, back at her apartment, Amira drafted a new story. Not an expose, not an investigation, a rebirth. Her name is Celeste. She was a mother, a pastor, a voice for justice. Then they tried to silence her. But faith isn't obedience. Faith is resistance. And love? Love never disappears. It waits. And when the world finally listens, it speaks. She saved the draft. Title: The Silence That Didn't Win. The press conference was scheduled for noon. By 10:45, the courthouse steps were already full. Cameras mounted on tripods, reporters huddled in tight circles rehearsing their lines, protesters lining the sidewalks holding signs that read "She Never Left." Faith doesn't mean obedience. The church knew. Inside the courthouse, Amira stood beside her mother in a secured anteroom. Celeste wore a deep navy blouse, collar high, sleeves long to cover the healing bruises. But nothing could dim the power in her posture, the stillness of someone who had finally been seen. "You don't have to do this," Amira whispered. Celeste didn't look at her. She was staring at her reflection in the bulletproof glass of the door, her own eyes, her own face. "No," she said, "I do." The moment she stepped outside, the crowd hushed. Celeste took the podium, a storm cloaked in grace. Amira stood behind her, flanked by Mercer, Rayla, Naomi, Quincy, and 4 of the 12 women rescued from the sanctuary compound, each of them marked, quiet, but holding their heads a little higher now. Celeste leaned into the mic. "My name is Celeste Sullivan." The words echoed through the plaza. "For 14 years, I was presumed dead, missing, absent, and in that time, others told my story for me. They said I left, they said I broke, they said I abandoned my children." Her voice didn't tremble. If anything, it deepened. "I am here to say they were wrong." Gasps, phones raised, a camera flash. "I was taken, not by strangers, but by men who wore crosses and smiles and the language of redemption like masks. I was told my silence would protect the church, that my pain would glorify God, that obedience was holier than truth." She looked directly into the front row cameras. It wasn't. The next day, the Attorney General of Georgia opened a formal investigation into Ward Ministries, the Sanctuary Network, and Ward Restoration Group, citing credible allegations of human trafficking, financial fraud, and systemic abuse cloaked under religious freedom. By Friday, Ezekiel Ward was indicted on 6 counts of unlawful detainment and conspiracy to commit fraud. Bishop Malachi Ward was served a federal subpoena. Over 27 women came forward with similar stories of deliverance retreats they'd never consented to join. The IRS opened a case file that made every accountant on Ward's payroll start sweating blood. And Amira? She went back to work. Not at her old desk job. She quit that the day after her mother spoke. Instead, she launched a new series, Sanctified Silence, an investigative docuseries focusing on spiritual abuse across the South. Her first feature was titled, "Faith is Not a Weapon." Meanwhile, Celeste took her time. The state offered her a book deal, a TV interview, even a speaking tour. She turned them all down. "I'll speak again when I'm ready," she told Amira. "Right now, I want to remember how to be a person." So she moved into a small house near the lake, tended to a garden, relearned the sky. But every week, without fail, she wrote letters to the women still in halfway shelters, to Rayla and Quincy, to a God she was learning to meet again on her own terms. And every Sunday she lit a single candle on her front porch. Not as a sermon, not as a symbol, just a reminder. I am not what they buried. I am the one who came back. On the 1-month anniversary of the rescue, Amira received an anonymous package. Inside was a single Polaroid, her mother, sitting in the garden, beside her, Liana, the girl who'd slipped the first message. They were smiling, holding hands. On the back was a note in Celeste's handwriting. 1 became 2. 2 will become more. The silence is breaking. Amira held the photo to her chest and closed her eyes. Not to mourn, to listen. And in the stillness she could already hear it, 1,000 quiet voices rising from the corners of the country saying, "Me too. I'm still here. Tell my story next." The house on Pineview Lane didn't look like much. 1 story, white siding, faded porch swing, the kind of place that whispered instead of shouted. But inside, it was blooming again, with the smell of rosemary, gospel vinyl spinning soft on the turntable, and sunlight streaking across Celeste Sullivan's new life. It was the first Sunday in 14 years she didn't spend behind locked doors or under someone else's name. Instead, she stood barefoot on her back porch, sipping tea and watching the wind comb through the garden she'd planted herself. Tomatoes, collards, jasmine vines crawling up the fence like they had somewhere to be. Freedom, it turned out, didn't shout either. It just kept showing up. Quiet, daily, certain. Later that afternoon, the family came over, all of them. Rayla brought a peach cobbler. Quincy carried a folding chair and a Bluetooth speaker. Naomi, who had once vowed never to step foot in a church again, arrived wearing a sundress and tears she didn't apologize for. Mercer came too, walking slower these days but still sharp as ever. He brought a manila envelope full of final court filings and a small wooden box. Amira arrived last, She came alone, in her favorite gray hoodie and scuffed sneakers, camera bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't knock. She didn't have to. Celeste was already holding the door open. They ate on the porch. They laughed. They cried. Quincy did an impression of Bishop Ward that made everyone wheeze with laughter. For the first time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was earned. It was rest. After dinner, Mercer handed Celeste the wooden box. She opened it slowly. Inside, her original wedding ring, her stolen journals, and the cross she used to wear around her neck, now tarnished, bent, but still whole. "I had a friend at evidence recovery," Mercer said quietly. "Figured these belonged where they started." Celeste turned the cross over in her hand. She didn't put it on, but she didn't set it down either. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Amira pulled her mother aside. "I'm thinking about writing a book," she said. Celeste raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "About you. About what happens when people weaponize faith, and what it takes to get it back." Celeste smiled. "Make sure you tell the whole truth." "I will." Amira paused. "Will you help me write it?" Celeste considered it, then nodded. "Yes, but only if you let me write the dedication." They laughed, forehead to forehead, tears caught in their lashes. Later, after everyone had gone, Amira sat alone in the backyard, camera in her lap. She didn't film. Not yet. She just watched her mother move through the house, closing windows, watering the last plants, turning off lights. Simple things, ordinary. But each one felt like a revolution. A reclamation. At exactly 9:14 p.m., Celeste stepped out onto the porch, struck a match, and lit a single white candle in the window. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to, because now the whole world knew. And somewhere, in some town that had swallowed too many names, another girl, another daughter, another survivor, would see that light and think, "She made it out. Maybe I can too." Epilogue, 6 months later. Amira's book debuted at #2 on the nonfiction bestseller list. The docuseries was nominated for a Peabody. Liana enrolled in college, journalism. Quincy gave his senior speech at graduation on the difference between escaping and being set free. And Celeste, she preached again. Once, unannounced, no stage, no pulpit, just her front porch, a circle of lawn chairs, and 24 women who came from across the state, some survivors, some seekers, all needing a place where their story didn't have to come with shame. She spoke with a voice that had been stolen, bruised, buried, but never broken. Her sermon was simple. God never asked for silence, only truth, and truth never needed permission.